Totally Tubular Games. We're back with another video. Let's get to it.
So, over the last few weeks, I've done a number of videos about games that released during the 2020s. I've talked about some of the greatest games of the 2020s, some of the worst games of the 2020s, some of the best remakes of the 2020s. Well, today we're going to be talking about the most disappointing games of the 2020s. I got 10 games for you that I played that genuinely disappointed me. You know, when you go into a video game, you usually have some kind of expectation. I mean, from time to time you might have absolutely no expectation, but all 10 of these games were games that I went into with some level of excitement. Maybe it was a bit foolish of me to go into some of these with it, but I consider myself rather optimistic, and so I went into these 10 games expecting them, well, to be better than they ended up being. Now, why were they disappointing? We're gonna get into that. This list is in no particular order, and yeah, this intro's gone on long enough. Let me know down below what are some of the most disappointing games you've played over the last 5 years. I genuinely would love to know. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Got the Patreon and the super thanks and memberships as well. Seriously, thank you all so very much. Major shout out to GhostShip2499. Seriously, thank you. Really do appreciate it. Alright, let's get to the games. So you know we gotta start with one of the most obvious games for a list like this, that being Starfield. Now, I know that there are plenty of people who are big fans of Starfield, people who have put tens, hundreds, dozens of hours into Starfield. I'm sure there are people that would say that Starfield is one of their favorite games of the 2020s, and you know what? If that's you, more power to you. But for me personally, this game was pretty disappointing. I quite enjoy Bethesda's big open world RPGs, you know, I like Oblivion, I love Skyrim, and I love Fallout 4, and so naturally, I was pretty excited for Starfield. Regardless of Bethesda's at times shaky track record, this was their next big open world RPG. This was going to be the next big RPG that I sink a hell of a lot of time into, and you know, I didn't really sink all that much time into Starfield because I just didn't really enjoy it all that much. While I wouldn't say that Starfield is an outright bad game, I wouldn't really say it's all that good either. It was just a very average, middling experience for me. It felt like for everything that this game got right, it got something wrong. For instance, the world, the characters, and the general storytelling I think is actually pretty decent to good in this game. The world is fleshed out, there's a lot of lore, there's a lot of interesting tidbits. There's absolutely something here, but then the actual quests themselves, the objectives you get in this game, are just not all that exciting. For the most part, they feel rather copy and paste. There's a lack of originality. A lot of them feel really uninspired, and most of them just evolve into go here, get this, bring it back, the end. And it's like there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but the game doesn't do a great job at making them feel like anything else. It felt like busy work more than anything else. The main quest line is like the weakest quest line in the entire game. Just go to these seemingly random planets, go through the little rings, rinse and repeat. This wasn't exciting the first time, and it sure as hell wasn't exciting the 10th time either. At least the faction quest lines were a bit more interesting, but some of these also had some real stinkers in them as well. Something else that I think the game gets right is the combat. It's arguably the best combat of any Bethesda open world RPG. The guns actually feel pretty decent, you can customize your weapons, the AI isn't dumb as rocks for the most part. It's actually a bright spot. Unfortunately, I think the RPG elements are rather lacking. I don't really care for the leveling up system. I don't think you get to play much of a role here, especially since you can just join all of the factions. A lot of your choices feel, dare I say, superficial, and it didn't feel like they had all that lasting impacts. The game has, unfortunately, a terrible sense of exploration, which has probably been one of my favorite aspects of any open world Bethesda game. Like, exploring these planets was just not fun. There's nothing here. There's nothing substantial or meaningful here. And yeah, I know that there have been updates to try to remedy this. I think there's even a vehicle that's been added, but too little, too late. It's not enough in my opinion. And you know what's funny is you'll go to one of the main cities that are actually, you know, built out with real level design, and there is a sense of exploration. You actually will just come across people, quests, and generally interesting stuff, just like the older Bethesda games. I wish, you know, the whole game was just curated like this versus the more random planets that don't really have anything on them. The game, of course, has plenty of technical issues, and unfortunately, I didn't really care for the whole space thing at all, actually. Flying around wasn't too fun, the combat wasn't all that exciting, and it just didn't really add all that much to the game, in my opinion. It felt like it just added more loading screens. Look, we could be here bitching about Starfield all day. I will just say that it disappointed me, and while I did have a little enjoyment with it, it was nowhere near as much as I was expecting or hoping for. So here's one that's really just got me shaking my head. I love Payday the Heist, and I really love Payday 2. It's one of my most played games of all time, so when I saw Payday 3, I went, yes, it's time. I'm so ready for Payday 3, and like everyone else, I got it at launch, got on, and went, yeah, I can't play the game. I couldn't connect to their server. And the game, for the most part, was just totally inaccessible. Of course, that was then, this is now. The game is playable just fine nowadays, but that doesn't mean that it's not disappointing. Payday 3 was still a pretty disappointing experience, even when you can't actually play it. It just feels like a step back from Payday 2 in so many areas. Yeah, the gunplay probably is better than Payday 2. The weapons actually feel pretty nice for the most part. The stealth certainly is better than what Payday 2 has. That's just an objective improvement. It's more advanced, it's more fleshed out, and it's just better developed. Unfortunately, though, the heists were just not as enjoyable as what Payday 2 had, and it feels like a lot of these heists, really the overall game flow is just kind of a step back from what Payday 2 featured even at launch. For instance, the heists themselves just don't feel anywhere near as fleshed out as Payday 2's. They don't feel as replayable, there's not as many random things going on in these heists, and then there's no multi-day heists whatsoever, which just will always be a letdown. I love the multi-day heists from Payday 2. That was like the most fun I had with Payday 2, is getting into the second or third day with a bunch of different random elements, and at times it almost provided a roguelike experience. And you know what, that's just completely absent here. Yeah, there are some random elements here and there, but the heists play out very similarly for the most part, more than Payday 2 did. And frankly, I just didn't find them as enjoyable as Payday 2's heists. I didn't have as much fun with them, I didn't think they were as memorable, and again, they felt rather similar to each other. I didn't really like how you could build out your character in Payday 3 either. It was very different from Payday 2, and not in a good way. It felt rather limiting. It also felt like they were more ready to sell you DLC and future heists rather than what you just got with the game. And yeah, you could argue Payday 2 absolutely did that as well, especially later in its life, but Payday 2 actually launched with quite a number of heists, and there were tons of free updates. Payday 3, yeah, there's just not as much here, and obviously there isn't going to be as many heists or as much content as a game that has been getting content updates for like 10 years, but at that point it's like, well, why would I want to move to Payday 3 then if Payday 2 is just so much better? Payday 3 doesn't really offer a new, better overall experience. Like, it'd be one thing if they were going for something completely different, but it still does feel pretty similar to Payday 2 in many aspects, and so it's like, yeah, why wouldn't I just stick with Payday 2? Now, I know that they've been constantly updating this game, they've been adding more heists to it, they've really been trying to beef it up, and I haven't really gone back and tried it because I was so disappointed at launch, but maybe one day it can try to get to where Payday 2 is. As things stand, yeah, it's one of the more disappointing games of the 2020s for me personally. So here's a game that I've brought up many times and will probably continue to bring up many times over, and that is Redfall. Easily one of my most disappointing games of all time. Redfall and its quality has been very well documented at this point. I wasn't too sure how it was going to be going in, but you know, Arcane had never steered me wrong before. I loved Dishonored, I enjoyed Prey, and I figured that at its worst this game would be just kind of mid and forgettable, but instead what we have is one of the worst games of the 2020s. Yes, it has gotten quite a bit better since launch, but a lot of this game's issues are just kind of baked into it. For instance, the story, world, characters, anything to do with that is just totally forgettable, uninspired, generic, and barely even there, which is a real shame. The gunplay, unfortunately, is not very good. It doesn't feel all that great, and for the most part, it feels like you're underwater. The AI, which has gotten better, is still dumb as a doornail. Not the knob, not the hinge, not the wood, not the metal, the fucking nail. That's how stupid these vampires are. And it really removes all the tension or difficulty that this game should have. Yeah, you get like a power or two, but these powers feel really uninspired, and I don't feel like they meaningfully change the gameplay whatsoever. It feels like they took a Dishonored game and all of its powers and then split it across 4 characters, and really the only word I got for that is lame. It's just lame. Even with co-op, the powers and general gameplay loop are just not all that exciting. The open world is one of the most bleak, desolate, uninspired, generic open worlds I have seen in the 2020s. There's just nothing even close to memorable here. The game also features a loot system, you know, because it wants to be a looter shooter, and it's some of the worst loot you'll find in like any video game. The looter system is just so terribly implemented, it really shouldn't be here. Straight up, it shouldn't be here. Then the game also sold itself as an immersive sim, this is not an immersive sim. There really is no two ways to go about anything. Shoot, sometimes immersive sims have more than two different ways to go about objectives. In Redfall, it really is just the same way every single time. There's not really any ways to mix things up, and the game just has a severe lack of variety. It just wasn't an enjoyable experience, straight up. Yeah, the technical issues have been fixed, and the game certainly is in a better place. But it still sucks. Vampire pun intended. So here's one that you might be a bit surprised to see on the list, and that is Skull and Bones. You might be going, really? You were disappointed by Skull and Bones? It looked terrible. Yeah, it might be really easy to say that it looked terrible now, but you gotta remember, when Skull and Bones was initially announced, it was actually pretty hype. Assassin's Creed 4 was, new at the time, and people absolutely loved it, myself included. And so when I saw that Ubisoft was going to do an entire game that was very similar to AC4 and would have multiplayer, yeah, that could be really awesome. And I still think that the potential is absolutely there, but unfortunately 10 years later, yeah, the game really failed to live up to any expectations. While there are some bright moments like the ship combat, which can actually have enjoyable moments from time to time, I mean, sometimes it actually gets pretty intense and you just barely walk away from a scrap. Well, in this case, sail away. But for every moment that is actually enjoyable in Skull and Bones, there's like 5 that are just frankly boring. Like, this game's structure is so terribly uninteresting. It feels like an MMO more than anything else. Most of the quests you get are like, go get materials, go build something, go upgrade your ship, go collect something for someone. It doesn't ever feel all that meaningful. It doesn't feel like there's any story behind it. It doesn't even feel like you're doing anything other than busy work. A lot of, if not almost all of these quests feel like they could be dailies or weeklies in any other live service, but here, they're like the main missions, and I'm like, seriously, this is what you thought the golden path should be? Yeah, I know it's a multiplayer focused live service title, but this just wasn't all that entertaining, and I really didn't have like any fun with it. I was like, woohoo, I got some more wood. What am I gonna fucking do with this? Okay, I can upgrade my ship. Now it does a tiny bit more damage. Cool. The on foot stuff is just basically non-existent. I mean, yeah, you can run around and interact with NPCs, but I mean, this might as well have just been a menu. It would have served the same purpose. I am aware that I guess Ubisoft is like updating the game and they're actually going to bring some on-foot combat. That would actually make things a lot better, but quite frankly, it shouldn't have come to this. Those original gameplay trailers that they showed for this game look way more exciting than what we ended up getting here. The game is honestly kind of a step back from Assassin's Creed 4, and it's like, Assassin's Creed 4 came out 10 years ago. How are we taking a step back? I mean, sure, maybe down the line this game just gets tons and tons of updates and it becomes the pirate game that we always wanted it to be, but as things are currently in 2025, yeah, I think the game is disappointing. It didn't stand up to AC4 like we thought it would, and it's one of the weakest games that Ubisoft have honestly ever put out. This was more disappointing for me than any of those Ghost Recon games, and I'd rather play just about any Assassin's Creed over this game. I'm good. So here we have another one that just hurts. It just hurts, man. I still don't want to rip off the band-aid and fully talk about the Saints Row reboot. I'll keep things brief here and just say they really messed up on this one, and I was pretty disappointed. The Saints Row community has been divided for years. Some people prefer the more edgy and serious Saints Row 2, and some people prefer the more goofy shit of Saints Row 3, 4, and Get Out of Hell. That's me. And so I didn't expect this game to please everybody, but what I didn't expect was for this game to do the opposite and please nobody. The whole community actually came together to go, oh yeah, fuck off. We're not interested in this shit. Yeah, the game does have its moments. It does have elements to it that actually aren't terrible, like the character creator. And the game actually does have a number of set pieces, but for the most part, the writing is horrible, the story's awful, the gameplay is uninspired, it's not all that engaging, the open world is pretty dull, and it's generally just one of the weakest open world titles of the 2020s. It disappointed me from the moment I played it, and I'm still pretty disappointed now. And I'm even sadder that it killed Volition. They're a legendary game studio that shouldn't have gone out like this. So here's another one that's just an absolute bummer, and that is Babylon's Fall. Now, Platinum Games, they have a pretty stellar track record. They've made some of the greatest action games of all time, but when I saw they were making a live service game, I was a bit weary. But as usual, I tried to be rather optimistic about this one. Unfortunately, that optimism died the moment I tried this game. It was a very, very uninspired hack and slash that had very few redeeming qualities. Ultimately, it's one of the most generic games of the 2020s, and I feel like most people have just completely forgotten about it at this point. Square Enix certainly has forgotten about it. They were the publisher. They shut this game down real quick. The game was met with indifference more than anything else, and they just pulled the plug like immediately. And so you can't even play this game anymore. That's why I just have trailer footage here. I didn't record myself playing it at the time, and there's nothing to play anymore. But I can tell you that this game really was nothing remarkable. Like, the combat, which usually is platinum strength, was okay at best, and everything else was just really subpar. The live service element just felt totally half-baked, and honestly, this game, it just shouldn't have been a live service game. It probably should have just been a more traditional Platinum Games title, but Square Enix really wanted to jump on that live service train. They really wanted to try to get one going, and yeah, it's easily the worst game Platinum has ever made. I feel like they still haven't totally recovered from this low-key, but I'm pretty excited for Ninja Gaiden 4. Hopefully it's a lot better than this because, yeah, this one was real disappointing. So here's one that I feel like has been pretty forgotten about, and that is Destruction All-Stars. Yeah, do you remember this one? It was pretty early in the PS5's life cycle, and it was essentially a live service car combat game. It wasn't Twisted Metal, but it still had that Twisted Metal DNA in it a little bit, and at this point we're so starved on car combat games that shit, I'll just take anything, especially if it's AAA. But unfortunately, this game ended up just being not it. While the gameplay absolutely does have its bright moments, and there actually is some fun to be had with this, for the most part, it just wasn't anywhere near as enjoyable as I was hoping it would be. The cars are not very well balanced at all, and getting out of your car really just wasn't all that advantageous or fun either. The game doesn't have enough game modes, it didn't have enough maps, and it really felt like this game just needed more. But then it didn't really get enough updates, it didn't get all the love it deserved, and it's pretty much been completely abandoned at this point. Like, yeah, I'm sure you can still find some games, but I doubt there are many people playing it, unfortunately, and it just left me rather disappointed. Oh yeah, there was even like a single player mode, but you know what, the less said about that the better. And then I was real disappointed when I saw that the Twisted Metal live service title was cancelled, and I was just like, seriously, are you kidding me? So we really only have Destruction All-Stars? This is the car combat game we get for the PS5? This is it? We get 2 seasons of a Twisted Metal show, but not one game? We don't even get a crossover in Destruction All-Stars? You know, Destruction All-Stars could have had something Twisted Metal. Shit, it could have been, you know, just a better game. That would have been nice. But no, what we have here is a very forgettable, somewhat generic, basically on life support live service that tried to do something a little different, and ultimately it just didn't pan out. While this certainly isn't the worst game of today, it still ultimately was disappointing, and I wanted a lot more from this game than we ended up getting. It could have been a lot worse, but it also could have been way, way better. So here's another one where people might be like, seriously, you were actually disappointed by this, but I have Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Yes, I was disappointed by this one. While I don't think this game is absolutely atrocious like plenty of other people do, I still don't think it's all that good, and I think at the very least we can all agree that this game should have been a lot better. I mean, it was developed by Rocksteady. Rocksteady have made some legendary games in the past. Batman Arkham City really is one of my favorite video games of all time. I was still expecting this game to be good, even with it being an awkward third-person shooter, even it being about the Suicide Squad, even with it being a live service. I was still hopeful this was going to be a good one. I got the game, and unfortunately this game just did not hit for me in several key areas. While I actually really like the Suicide Squad, I think they have great personalities and the game is genuinely funny, unfortunately the story itself just isn't all that great, especially in the second half. I mean, yeah, they are gonna kill the Justice League, but that doesn't really lead to the best story, and the ending is just fucking stupid. And there's really no two ways about that. And when it comes to the gameplay, yeah, it just leaves a lot to be desired. While I actually do like how chaotic it gets at times and you're just jumping all over the place and it can be an absolute frenzy, unfortunately this is one of those games where after you've played it for like 2 or 3 hours, you've pretty much seen everything it has. The open world itself really isn't exciting. Yeah, it's vertical, but there's not much to it. It doesn't feel all that lived in, and there's no sense of exploration here. Remember all those amazing Riddler trophies? Well, the Riddler kinda shows up here, but it doesn't really amount to all that much, and then the game is just totally lacking in the variety department. Like, every single mission is basically exactly the same, which is just to wipe everything out. Yeah, sometimes they mix it up and are like, defend an area. Sometimes that area might even move, but it doesn't matter. You're still just wiping everything out. And while the combat has its moments, for the most part, it really just becomes a tedious, repetitive slog, no matter which character you're playing as. The characters feel nearly identical outside of an ability or two. Yeah, I loved playing as King Shark because I can just jump into the sky Hulk Ultimate Destruction style and slam into the ground, but that's like the only thing he has that's different from, say, Harley Quinn, who just uses a grappling hook. And then we have Boomerang, which is just weird, and flying around with Deadshot was okay, but different traversal mechanics just don't make the characters feel different enough, in my opinion. And then the boss fights, the less said about them, the better. Yeah, the game looks absolutely incredible. Yeah, it's actually got some good music. And yes, they even updated it with more characters in an offline mode, but it really doesn't change that this game was still disappointing. I was still let down by it, and really, I just wanted this game to be better. I truly just wanted this game to be better. I want every game to actually be really good, genuinely, but it should have been so much more than what we ended up getting. So here's one that I actually haven't brought up in quite a while, and that is Infinity Strash Dragon Quest: The Adventure of Dai. And you might be going, what was that mouthful of a sentence you just said? Well, this is actually a Dragon Quest game. It is a spin-off in the Dragon Quest series, and it's based off of the Dragon Quest manga, The Adventure of Dai, and it sees you going through some of Dai's adventures. And I was actually somewhat excited for this one. I didn't know anything about The Adventure of Dai. I was really curious to see what it was all about, and it's a Dragon Quest game. I mean, Dragon Quest is usually pretty synonymous with high quality. But then this game, it just didn't do it for me, and I would argue that it's like the worst Dragon Quest game ever made outside of some mobile titles. And while the game's not atrocious, it's not this horrible game, it might honestly be the best game of this entire list, it was still pretty disappointing. We waited a long time for this game, it kept getting delayed. At one point we all thought it was canceled, but it finally came out and it just kind of felt like a whimper. The game was not even the entire story of The Adventure of Dai, it stops like halfway through, which was pretty lame, but this game just has one of the laziest retellings I've ever seen of a manga or anime. For instance, when you play a Dragon Ball game, usually they recreate scenes from the show or the manga in the game engine. There's in-game cinematics and everything. This is just kind of what we've come to expect. This is the standard. Well, not The Adventure of Dai. This game instead just has pictures from the manga with some voiceovers, and this, unfortunately, is just not a very exciting way to tell a story. And what's crazy is from time to time, every few hours or so, the game actually does recreate a moment from the manga using in-game graphics, and this is like 10 times better, and I'm like, why isn't the whole game like this? Yes, it's obviously a lot more work, but this is just kind of what you would expect when they're, making a manga into a game. But this is the exception rather than the norm. A majority of the game, unfortunately, is you looking at still images, which, yeah, that's pretty freaking lame, and it doesn't lead to the most enjoyable storytelling. And a majority of the game legit is this. A majority of the game actually is cutscenes, but they're not really cutscenes, it's more like you looking at these still images. And at that point, you might as well just read the manga. When you're actually playing the game, it is a decent hack and slash. It's not great, and it leaves a lot to be desired, but it's not awful. You get to play as more than just Dai, and the other characters do actually feel different from each other, and there actually is, some enjoyment to be had here. Unfortunately, the bosses are really spongy. They just take a lot of abuse. The game actually can become rather difficult, especially if you don't want to go grind. And really, at its best, I think the gameplay is just okay. The game certainly looks nice, it has that Dragon Quest flair and aesthetic to it, but unfortunately for me personally, it just doesn't really live up to the Dragon Quest name, and I was expecting this game to be a lot more than what we ended up getting. It was just really middling to under average, and I'll never know the true story of Dai because the game doesn't finish it, and I'm willing to bet we do not get a sequel to this one. Yeah, I probably should have just read the manga. So here's another one that I brought up countless times, and I'll probably bring it up countless more times, and that is Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown. Now, I like the Test Drive Unlimited series, I was excited for a new one. I really thought it could be something special, especially considering the original Test Drive Unlimited and its sequel were essentially Forza Horizon before Forza Horizon, but this new one, man, this game stunk. This one stunk way worse than the Wendy's bathroom. This one was just upsetting. There was no LOL, no LMAO, no raffle, there was just sadness, sad face emoji inserted here. The game was just so painfully mediocre. The driving itself wasn't terrible, but it didn't feel all that great either, but everything else in this game just kind of fell apart. Yeah, the city itself was pretty cool, but the open world was just so lifeless, so desolate. It felt as desolate as Driver on the PS1. The PS1, damn it! The events in this game are just so painfully generic also. It's just race, race, race. You do these like checkpoints, but it doesn't matter. It's still the same fucking race. The AI are just all over the place. The rubber banding is crazy. Sometimes they're running into the wall, and sometimes they're pro fucking drivers from F1. And you know what makes things way worse? The fact that you can't pause the game or restart races. Yeah, a game released in 2024 where you can't restart the race. You remember in like pole position when you could restart the race? Remember in like Super Nintendo racing games where you could restart the race? Well, not here, and the game's always online and there's nobody playing it. I played the game at launch and I couldn't find anybody, and because you can't find anybody, because there's basically, nobody, it just kind of ruins the whole faction system and the whole live service MMO light experience that they were going for here. Say what you want about the crew, but there was always people playing the crew. You never had any trouble getting into races or online events, especially in the crew 2, and yeah, really that third crew game, Motorfest, which is actually a pretty good game, unlike Solar Crown, which was just a waste, honestly. The whole going first person to check out cars or getting a crib or anything that, was really popular in the first two games is just a waste of time here. It should have just been a menu. It doesn't add anything, and it's worse than what was on the 360. This game in general is worse than what was on the 360. It's one of my most disliked games of the 2020s, and it's one of the worst racing games I've ever played. I can't imagine this game surviving much longer. I don't think there's an offline mode still, which really sucks. I don't want this game lost to time. I don't want any game lost to time, but we're not really losing all that much with Solar Crown. It just wasn't very enjoyable. I absolutely don't recommend it, and it's sad because the Test Drive series has just gone through the ringer. It has gone through some dog shit, and this game continues that trend for the series, which is just disappointing. It really is. But that's not the last game for today. I got a bonus one that I'm throwing in there, Cyberpunk 2077 at launch. I'm never forgetting it. I'm never letting CD Projekt Red forget it. This shit was so disappointing for many years, and I'm never gonna let them live it down. Alright though, that's it for today's video. What were some of the most disappointing games you played over the last 5 years? If you made it to this part of the video, you can comment our secret code word. Our code word today is going to be fries. Yeah, not nug, fries. And so with that, have a nice day. Stay safe, y'all. Bye-bye.